Hi, I'm the Dutch birder and I've been birding for over 15 years, and in those years I found my fair share of mega rare birds like river warbler, citrine wagtail, pallet swift, parrot crossbill, American golden plover, semi-pomoted sandpiper, amongst others. Today we're on a birding adventure to Texel and also give you my 5 tips on how you can find more rare birds.
While providing you with these tips, I'm also showing you the adventure where I put all my own tips into practice. We started our bird watching at the northern tip of the island in the so-called gardens. Here we quickly saw a nice species in the form of a windchat.
My first tip for finding rare birds is to get up early. You want to be in the field with sunrise for a couple of reasons. Birds that migrated during the night will come down and look for a spot to spend the day, so they are more visible than later on the day. And the experience learns that they are also more vocal in the early morning and they respond better to playback. But more on that later.
As we had to be in the field at first light, we had to catch the first ferry to Texel, which would sail at 6:30 am. I'll explain later as to why we picked Texel. But to catch the 6:30 ferry, I had to get out of bed at 3:30 am, then pick up Willem at 4:30 and Miro at 5 o'clock, after which we had to drive a little more than an hour to the terminal. Once we were sailing, it began to get light, and we saw Texel coming closer. Now it was still a half-hour drive to the gardens. During this ride, we enjoyed the sunrise and dreamed of the rare species we might find.
We've just found a barred warbler, saw it flying in and then heard it calling. But now I'm looking for a spot from where I can film it, hopefully.
The barred warbler was in the most obscured garden, so we tried to observe the bird from a higher vantage point. Meanwhile, we occasionally played the sound of the species. Unfortunately, we only saw the bird flying one more time.
The second tip for finding more rare birds I have for you is look at the weather patterns.
If you want to use your time in the field as efficiently as possible, check the weather maps. For example, you could see that Friday marked the beginning of a favorable eastern flow, which pushes many migratory birds over the Netherlands that would otherwise fly more centrally over Europe to Africa. Seeing this pattern emerge on the weather map meant I took a day of work because on Friday we had to be in the field to intercept the migrating birds.
While scanning the shrubs for warblers, I noticed a bird flying over, and it turned out to be an osprey, which is a very scarce bird for the Isle of Texel. Nice!
For the past years, ospreys have been breeding in the Netherlands and their numbers are slowly increasing. But on Texel, they are still quite scarce. A little further on, there was a dunnock, a very common species, but it allowed us to capture some nice footage. We left the gardens via the bike path heading south, checking every bush along the way. Here we saw more warblers, such as a chiffchaff, and more common whitethroats.
And the third tip for finding more rare birds is to go birding with friends, because then in the field you can discuss identification, and also with 6 eyes you see more than with 2. And for example, if you see a warbler sitting in the bush, then you can surround the bush and check it from multiple sides, so you have a greater chance of identifying that bird.
Like here, where the 3 of us took a side of the bush to make sure no bird escaped our attention. We left the dunes and entered the woods. Here we saw another dunnock, some blue tits and a blackcap, after which we decided to return to the car.
Just picked up a northern goshawk, but sadly it flew too fast, so I didn't get any decent footage, but a nice bird anyways, a juvenile this one. Just picked up 2 great white egrets, which is not that common for the Owl of Texel, but the funny thing was they were sitting in the dunes, something I've never seen before. Yes, just picked up 2 red-footed falcons, 1 adult male and 1 juvenile. Let's go!
Red-footed falcons are rare in the Netherlands and are typically seen during eastern winds. Finding a rare species always gives an incredible thrill, as you can see from my reaction. We walked back through the gardens and saw a local northern wheat deer. We also noticed that there were significantly more birds in the bushes. Fresh arrival. In these shots, you hear some loud bird noise. This is me using playback, as this helps luring the birds out, but more on when to use, and more importantly, not to use it, later in the video.
And my 4th tip for finding more rare birds is to go to the right areas. For instance, during fall migration, the water owls are very good.
This happens because birds don't particularly like water. After a night of flying over the sea, they will often settle at the first available spot, and if they overshoot, they'll soon find another body of water. This is why the concentration of migratory birds in the fall on the Wadden Islands is much higher than elsewhere in the country. We also briefly checked the cream-colored corsair field, but there was nothing of interest. However, we received a message that the red-footed falcons we had found earlier were now further south, so we decided to head that way. The red-footed falcons were in the same area where the geofalcon had been this winter, apparently a good area for rare falcons.
Thank you.
We are now going to twitch our self-found red-footed falcons to hopefully get some better shots.
My prime lens without stabilization isn't really suitable for this, but I'm saving up for an upgrade.
Ja, Texel bij de randweg.
Ja?
En bij het bandwoud zat ook een kleine torenvalk, maar die was... It is now the middle of the day and it is quite warm. Warblers have gone quiet now. So we've decided to do some twitching, as there's also red-necked phalarope present on the island. So let's see if we can find that one.
In the Mui, there's a nice water pool where some waders, such as a wood sandpiper and green sandpiper, were foraging. I also saw a little egret and a great egret standing side by side, but when I started filming, the great egret disappeared behind a bush. After some searching, we also found the red-necked phalarope, but it was unfortunately quite far away.
For my last and final tip of the video, during fall migration, make some use of playback to lure out the birds. During the breeding season, you shouldn't use any playback as it could disturb the breeding birds, and that's something we don't want to happen. But during fall migration, every now and then, use some playback to lure out the gems amongst the birds in the bushes. Good luck!
After a while, I apparently wore out my friends and it was time for a siesta.
After we had a siesta and had some dinner, we are now back at the northern tip of the island. There's a rain shower coming over, so hopefully that would bring some extra birds down, which we can find. Nice! We've picked up our second osprey of the day.
We hoped that a rare species had landed in the gardens during the day that we could still find.
Willem just picked up a blue throat, which is a very scarce species for the month of September. Lovely!
Most blue throats leave the Netherlands in July, with the latest ones departing in August. By September, there are only a few left passing through.
Just picked up another common redstart. I love that species during migration, with that red tail shooting through the bushes. Wow, what an epic day of birding this was. Looking at the weather charts and then going to Texel turned out great. With 2 ospreys, 2 red-footed falcons and loads of flycatchers and warblers. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.